What's up YouTube? KS Gun Guy here. Thanks for joining me today as always. If you like what you see here, do be sure to like, subscribe, and share, and there's plenty more content on the way. So I'm excited to show you guys today the Beretta APX. Now I have to say, there are times where I am wrong about firearms without question, and this is one of those times. I've picked up and looked at the Beretta APX over the last, 4, 5, 6 months, however long it's been around, and for whatever reason I've walked away each time. But finally, after about the 7th or 8th time I picked it up, I decided to go ahead and bite the bullet, no pun intended, and pick it up. All the guys at Centerfire Shooting Sports, my local range here in Kansas, said, hey, you know what, we're tired of you picking it up, just give it a try and see what you think. So that brings us to right now. And of course it is unloaded. I do have an unloaded magazine in here as usual. I just prefer that. But let's go ahead and knock some specs of the APX out of the way. The overall length is 7.56 inches. The height is 5.6 inches. The overall width is 1.3 inches. Give you a good look at that right there. The barrel length is 4.25 inches. The weight, unloaded with an empty magazine, is 26.8 ounces, and it does come with two 17-round steel magazines. Pretty good quality, too, I must say. At least they feel that way so far. Now, I know there have been some sales on this over the past few months. You could get a free magazine or two, that sort of thing. Sadly, that was not the case, so I only got the two to test, but they've done just fine for me. So let's go ahead and take a look at some of the features. And there are some really cool features of the Beretta APX, but there are also some that are a little bit more unusual and have maybe garnered a little bit of criticism from some of the different reviewers that have checked this out before now. So from a grip standpoint, let's go ahead and take a look at that. Now, it does have a removable grips here. In other words, it is modular. So the trigger system itself actually can come out, and I did that. I switched out the black, which is what it came in, for the FDE, and I just watched a video. I think it was Mr. Guns and Gear, something like that. I like his channel quite a bit, and he did a demo of it, and it was really easy to follow, so not a big deal. I was able to take that out. But aside from it being modular from a full grip standpoint, kind of like the 6 Hour P320, it takes it actually a step further, and it does actually have back straps along with it. So you've got small, medium, and large, and those are the FDE. Of course, the black did have the black back straps, but you've got a lot of different ways to make this not only look the way you want it to, but also make it really comfortable in the hand. Now I'm using the medium back strap. I tried the large and it worked okay. The medium, just for whatever reason, felt a little bit better. From a grip texture standpoint, on the back you do have some relatively aggressive texturing from a backstrap standpoint, and then on the sides you do have a little bit more subdued, although still noticeable grip texture as well, and all of this is part of the backstrap itself. And then on the front you do have some very subtle finger grooves with a little bit of texturing in each one of them, and I must say it actually is incredibly comfortable to hold. Now this is a full-size firearm. I mean, it's 17 rounds. And generally speaking, I gravitate towards more compact guns, but for whatever reason, this one just feels kind of good and kind of right to me. So I've been very impressed with the way this feels. Now, one unusual thing, or one nice feature about this, if you can see the base plate on the magazine up here, you'll notice that there are ledges on both sides, and that just makes it really easy to yank out the magazine if for some reason you have a malfunction. So I'm glad they built that feature into the APX. Now, the magazine release is ambidextrous, although not out of the box. You do have to switch this out. I have not tried to do that, so I'm not sure exactly how difficult it is to do, but I imagine it's not too bad, and so far the manual actually has been pretty good at helping kind of line all of this stuff up and switch out backstraps, that sort of thing. So I'm sure the manual would explain that pretty well. From a slide lock or slide release standpoint, it is ambidextrous out of the box, and it's usable on both sides. They work very well, not only as a lock but also as a release. Now it does have an accessory rail for lights, lasers, grenade launchers, as you would expect, certainly with a polymer full-size gun. No difference there, and certainly very usable. Now it does have a decocker right here. There's a little button right here. I'll get my trusty pointer, and if you were to put like this pointer here, or punch here, or even the tip of maybe a 223 bullet, something like that in here, you would be able to actually decock the gun and render it safe, essentially, so the trigger would not be able to be used at that point. I haven't really messed around with that very much. I haven't had much of a need to, but one of the ways to disassemble the gun, you can actually use this instead of pulling the trigger, which is nice if you don't want to pull the trigger. And speaking of disassembly, one of the things that has been criticized about the APX is its mechanism for disassembly, that it's not quite so user-friendly. I must say I disagree. It actually has been very user-friendly as far as I'm concerned. Once again, it is unloaded. I'm going to go ahead and pull the trigger because I'm not going to use the Decocker. I just prefer doing it this way. I'm used to it. And then you press the button on this side, and I know you're not going to be able to see this very well yet, but you do pull down the lever after you press the button, and the slide actually just comes right off. And it's, you know, it's all the same stuff that you would expect from a striker-fired firearm. All the finishes are very nice. Now you'll notice it's a little over-greased right now. I tend to do that with new firearms as they're breaking in, so some of that grease can soak into the steel a little bit, and then I'll taper it off. But all the usual parts in here, of course, you've got your barrel, and then you do have a dual captive guide rod. It's a little bit unusual looking, but it actually does do a very good job of reducing recoil, and it is all steel in there. And then you do have your trigger assembly there. I know there's a little chunk of grease right there. Again, that'll wear away. But this whole piece inside, which is the serialized part, can be removed. And of course, again, you can switch frames. And they've got, I think, another frame as well. It's a gray frame, and they may even have an OD green frame as well. So you've got a little bit of variety there, which is nice. But again, in terms of takedown, the gun is just fine, not a big deal whatsoever. Now, for the elephant in the room, so to speak, or I guess there are kind of two elephants, but one you can definitely notice, these slide serrations. This is one of the things that has certainly garnered the APX a little bit of attention, and it's got its proponents and detractors as well. I must say, I actually thought it was a little bit unusual, but in a good way. I like guns that kind of step outside the box a little bit and provide something a little bit unusual, and the APX definitely fits that bill. These slide serrations are here for very much a good purpose, and basically the idea is anywhere you grab the gun on the slide, you can rack the slide. That's exactly what those are there for, which is really nice. They have actually proven to be very useful, and I kind of like the fact that Beretta did that. And I don't know, we'll see if some other manufacturers kind of go to this more aggressive philosophy than just your smaller serrations on the front and the back. Who knows? But good on Beretta. I think it's kind of cool. From a sights perspective, it does come with all steel sights. Now, one thing that I noticed, and I think some other people have probably noticed as well, and I know you're not going to be able to see it all that well on camera. However, this is a 3-dot setup, and a couple of things. The front dot is actually quite large. It's almost kind of a golf ball there a little bit, and it's almost overwhelmingly large. And again, you probably can't see it very well on camera, but I assure you, it's fairly large. Although it's definitely usable. Now, one criticism I have with these back dots here, the paint is actually starting to wear away already, and I think that's unfortunate. I have seen some Smith & Wessons do the same thing, and so for whatever reason, whatever type of paint they're putting in these, it's just not as durable as I would like to see. Now, I may at some point switch these sights out depending on whether this becomes a collection gun or not. I haven't decided that just yet. Now, I mentioned another elephant in the room. Well, we're going to get to that now. So when I pull the trigger, we already know it's safe. I'll go ahead and pull that trigger. I think you'll probably notice, and I'm going to bring this in, you'll see a little tab that's sticking up on the back of the slide right there in front of the sights. And this is actually part of the safety plunger mechanism. You know, it's pretty unusual, I have to say, and a lot of people have wondered if this would potentially have the ability to be broken or damaged or anything in a firefight. Yeah, I suppose that's entirely possible. You might be able to get some debris in there, although probably the likelihood is pretty low. And I will say, and I still have it, I'm still holding it up right now, it does not in any way impede or intrude in your sight lineup whatsoever. You cannot see it at all. So it's not a distraction in terms of shooting, which is good. But I will say, once again, that's going to go down now. It is quite unusual, and I'm not quite sure why Beretta did that. But again, at the end of the day, it doesn't really take away from the shootability of the gun whatsoever. Now, the only other thing that I kind of criticize a little bit, and I know this is a little bit corny, but the back of the gun, I don't really like the way it looks. I'm not very fond of this back plate right here. I think it looks a little bit cheap, a little bit flimsy, but it definitely works, and that's more a personal criticism rather than anything to do with the function of the gun, just kind of an opinion. But beyond that, I think the gun really actually is a pretty good looking gun, and it is certainly a very comfortable gun to hold on to, and I've actually grown quite fond of it. So enough of me jabbering about this. Let's go ahead and take a look at a little bit of shooting at the range and see how this does. Welcome back. I hope you enjoyed that footage at the range. So from a shooting perspective, I must say the APX is actually quite a delight to shoot. In fact, it's reminiscent to me of a full-size Smith & Wesson M&P. I've always felt that the M&Ps, despite the fact that they have some flaws, and I think they do, they are a lot of fun to shoot at the range. They're very soft recoiling and very comfortable to shoot, and I think the Beretta APX is very much the same. This is a type of gun that you could take to the range and you could really shoot all day long which is fantastic. So speaking of shooting, let's go ahead and take a look at the trigger and see what this thing's made of. So, well, not literally, of course. So this does have a safety dingus in it, just like a lot of the modern polymer firearms here. Now, one thing about it, which I think is a little bit unusual, as the dingus goes down, and probably not going to be able to see this very well, it does not actually go flat inside the trigger. I'll kind of pull this up here for you so you can see a little bit. Hopefully you can see that okay. It actually still sticks out a little ways. And so if you're using the pad of your finger, and if you watch my channel, you know I don't, but if you do, you will definitely always feel this as you're shooting. So it's kind of an unusual sensation a little bit. Now I wrap my hand in a little bit more, so for me, I don't notice it quite as much, but it is a little bit unusual, and it takes a little bit of time to get used to. Once you do, it's really not too bad. And this trigger also, from a geometry standpoint, is just a little bit more flat. It's angled more down than out. And I do like that quite a bit. It means there's just a little bit less length that you have to work through to work the trigger. So speaking of that, let's go ahead and do a couple of pulls here real quick and just see how this does. So from an uptake standpoint, it's incredibly smooth and also very short. I mean, you've got about 1 millimeter of travel, just a little bit more than that, to get to your wall. And it is a defined wall, but it's not terribly hard. And once you do, there's your break. And I like this break quite a bit. It's very crisp. It's very clean. There's no travel through the break or anything like that. There's some other triggers out there where you just keep on going after it breaks. Not this one. And then your reset is right there. And it travels about 1.5 millimeters, 2 millimeters out, something like that. And of course, I'm ballparking all of this, to be honest with you. But then you go back to the start right there and you're ready to go. I mean, it is a really short traveling trigger all the way around. So we'll do this one more time. There's your uptake, again, right to the wall. Not a lot of distance there. And there's your break. And there's your reset. I mean, it really is actually a very delightful trigger. I've been thoroughly impressed with the trigger at the range. And again, it's the kind of gun that you could shoot all day. So I'll go ahead and test this a couple of times on the gauge. And of course, I'm not actually using my finger, putting any pressure on it. I'm just holding the bar in place. So I got 5 pounds, 11.8 ounces, and testing off camera, I was getting around 5.5 or 5 3/4 pounds. So this is pretty consistent right here. And I know there's always somebody that gives me crap on my technique for the trigger gauge, rightly so. But it is what it is. Just take it for what it's worth. 5 pounds, 12.3 ounces. We'll do this one more time. With these flat triggers, it's a little bit easier to pull, which is kind of nice. Let's do that one more time. All right, so that was 5 pounds, 5.2 ounces. I could feel that that was slipping a little bit down. So really, it's kind of averaging somewhere again between the 5.5 and 5 3/4 pounds for the trigger. And Beretta advertises this at 6 pounds. So their ballpark is actually pretty accurate. But like the Sig Sauer P320, which also has a heavier trigger, as long as it's a good quality, good feeling trigger, I think that's perfectly fine. And this definitely is exactly the same. In my shooting, I did notice the first time I took it, and I took it along with the Nighthawk Custom, which I did a recent review on recently. I shot that 45 first and then went to this. Probably a big mistake, because I noticed immediately when I was shooting, following up, everything was going to the right. So I've gone back and done a couple of other shooting sessions with this. So I've got about 400 or so rounds through it at this point in time. And I've been able to get it a little bit closer to center. Now, I know I'm not a bullseye shooter by any stretch. I'm much more a defensive shooter. But from a defensive standpoint, it definitely does the job. It can certainly put rounds on center without too much of a problem. Even with the golf ball sights, it's not a big deal. So at the end of the day, once again, I've been proven wrong by having a first impression about a gun that I'm delightfully wrong and surprised about. This actually has turned out to be a really good gun. So I'm looking forward to hearing what you guys have to say about the Beretta APX. If you've got some experience with it, if you're wondering about some of the different features and components of it, I'm looking forward to that. And don't forget to join us on Wednesday nights. Me, Big Johnson Guns and Gear, and 1776 or Bust. Every Wednesday night we get together and have a chat and talk with all of you guys all about the world of firearms for sure. And we switch up channels. Be sure to subscribe to those guys. Their links are always down below. So we're looking forward to hearing from you there. Otherwise, again, thanks so much for joining me today. Looking forward to those comments, and I will see you next time. Thanks.